So, welcome back to the main room, the plenary session, where we want to learn a little bit about what you discussed in the different tracks. So, I mean, you know that today's topic is the evidence-based policy cases, from data to decision making. So we had 3 tracks: track 1 on health and social well-being, track 2 on climate change, and track 3 on mobility. So I would like to ask, like how we started out, would like to ask the moderators of each track to give us a quick overview of what was discussed, the main challenges that jumped up in your session, and the recommendations that made, or the key takeaways that you can tell us from your session that we should take away from the event today. Germana, can I invite you to report back on health and social, please? Zach, do we have Germana in the room?
Yeah, she should be here, but I don't know if she's at her computer.
Okay, while Germana is coming back to us, let's move on with track 2. Panagiotis, can I ask you to tell us what were the main takeaways that we should remember from the discussions you had at climate change?
Of course, I'll be happy to do so. We had a very interesting and
can you switch on your camera, Panagiotis, so we can see you?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks
can you
a lot.
See me now?
Great. Yes, perfect.
Okay. If you hear me breaking, please do close the camera.
Okay.
And in order to save time. It was a very vivid and interesting discussion. We had all 3 presentations and then a kind of open discussion that we unfortunately didn't have the time to conclude, actually. We were in the recommendations phase when the timer popped up and closed the room. In principle, there were let's say that the policy landscape presented was referring to quite a broad spectrum of application domains, of course, in the context of climate change, but we referred to the metropolitan city level and the climate-oriented challenges that a metropolitan city can face. Then to specific crisis situations that are related to climate change, such as floods, power outages, wildfires, forest fires, etc., but also the needs and challenges that are both policymakers oriented, but at the same time ICT oriented. For example, a common place in every presentation and every discussion was the lack of data. So every stakeholder claims that data might be there in terms of volume or variety, but either they are not representative or they are not processable. The most important thing is that they all agree that data are not close to citizens. This was a very important note that everyone made, that data are a bit far from what citizens would like to offer and understand, and that we should follow a more SSH, social sciences and humanities approach, also in the context of collecting, processing data. Another kind of horizontal outcome was that multidisciplinarity is needed. You need to have the right teams in the right place and not follow siloed ways in terms of expertise involved. And for that, of course, 2 different needs, but at the same time challenges were mentioned. The first was the need for lifelong reskilling and upskilling of policymakers in order for them to be able to understand, to comprehend what their consultants, ICT teams, subcontractors are offering them. So capacity building in terms of reskilling, upskilling, and lifelong learning was a clear challenge noted. While at the same time, no one should forget that we're talking about money. So the provision of budgets for this initiatives either for consultants, for subcontracting, for re-and upskilling, etc., should be in the agenda. No initiative can take real form and be realized if it's not, in a sense, cost-oriented, cost-effective. Of course, climate change asks for leaving costs outside the equation, but as we all know, policymakers and policy-making organizations do not. So we do have to keep costs on the head while talking these kind of initiatives. Another important note is that any type of innovation should at first complement traditional ways of doing the everyday's activity of policymakers. Disruptive innovations are not very well perceived, and experience has shown that they do not deliver. So a recommendation was to try to blend new ideas, new tools, new methodologies, new approaches with the ordinary way of doing business, if we can refer to it like that. These were the main outcomes. Now, in terms of additional standalone, if I can say so, challenges and needs, the lack of citizens and end users participation was noted, despite the fact that the Commission and other, of course, global or cross-border organizations invest huge amounts of money and invest on projects, on framework programs, etc. It seems that civic society is either not very well informed on or not very interested on such initiatives. They want more to the point things in order to make them engaged. For example, Antonio informed us of a very interesting statistic that none of the end users that were involved in the Decido activities in policymakers from this stakeholders group have ever used any of the EOSC services, which is kind of striking when it comes to such an important EU level initiative. Another challenge that was pointed forward is the prediction of impact. Maybe the most mid to long term challenge is to be able to predict impacts of specific policy decisions, either through complex system dynamics, complex modeling, and data processing activities. It's a challenge that should be kept in mind how to deal with, because predicting impact on specific policy decisions, of course, directly makes them more effective. I think that these were the main things, trying to be very fast, and apologies if I'm a bit overwhelming with information from our track, and of course the three presenters as well as the participants. If I have forgotten something very important, please do compliment what I have just said. And Marika, thanks again for the opportunity to be here and to moderate this very interesting track.
Thank you very much, Paniotis. I think the summary was really impressive. Just to highlight a few of your comments which I found very interesting was the lack of data, the data that are not so close to citizens, the cost effectiveness that we need to bear in mind. We also need to bear in mind that we need to blend new technologies into the already existing approaches. Civic society not always informed or interested in the new approaches that we provide. For an example that you give is that EOSC services have not yet been used by anyone in the co-creation events that were organized. Then the prediction of impact of the policy decision making should be taken into account. These were very, very useful recommendations and key takeaways. So I would like to move on to the next session. Susie, can you give us a summary of the main points that came out of this session and the recommendations that were made for policymakers?
Yes, yeah, sure. We heard about the projects in 3 cities, in Pilsen, in Sofia, and in Nicosia, and how these cities are using data and obviously new technologies to improve transport policy. In Pilsen's case, they started small. They focused on specific use cases, and built up from there to create a digital twin of the city, which is now enabling them to focus on sort of more local issues. In Anna's case, in Sofia, they're focused on looking at what data they have and how they can supplement that with citizen data. So, for example, from their contact center that they have, and sort of integrating this data and using it to predict what kind of issues and challenges there are with road infrastructure. And then Alessandro's case for Nicosia and the AI for Public Policy project, they're bringing AI into the mix. How do you use AI to get more from the data, to be able to create more sort of personalized sort of transport experience? A couple of the challenges that came out from the session. I think some of the biggest one was acceptability. Acceptability by the policymakers themselves. They're usually busy people, got 101 demands on them, and how do you bring them along with you? How do you get them to accept the tools? In Pilsen's case, it was showing them, building, experimenting, showcasing the benefits, getting them excited about the tools and what it can mean for them. And Sofia and Nicosia, it was more about the co-creation, getting the policymakers involved from the start in actually building the solutions. In terms of other challenges, I guess communication is a key one. Trying to make sure that you're always sharing your results with people, bringing people along with you, being visual about what you're doing, making it easy for people to understand. In terms of recommendations for policymakers, start small, and then you can build gradually. Focus on use cases. If you start trying to do the whole enchilada in terms of fixing road systems and mobility, with all the interdisciplinary nature of what's going on there, you'll just never get started. So really focus on use cases to begin with, and then just don't be afraid of the data at all. It's an opportunity. Data and the technologies like AI are actually an opportunity for cities. Don't be overwhelmed by it. And again, seeing each city, how they keep going back to the same data sets and reevaluating and see what else can be done with the data, I think was very important. If you don't see opportunities right now, you may do in the next year or couple of years moving forward. So that's a very quick nutshell of what we talked about. I'm sure there's so much more we could have shared, but I'm sure the report will capture everything which goes out to you later. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Susie. I think what was very interesting from your summary is that you really focus on the people. So you focus on the citizens, you focus on communicating with them to be as transparent as possible. You focus on the communication with the policymakers in the co-creation events and methodologies, and I very much like your comment on start small, don't be overwhelmed, and look at the long term. Thank you for that, Susie. Zach, do we have Germana in the room?
Yes.
Hi, Germana.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. Can you give us a quick summary of the discussion that you had, the main takeaways that were mentioned, and the recommendations that you may have for policymakers?
Absolutely. So we focused on the topics from different points of view. So from the health point of view and the cancer point of view, which we realize it will be important because we've been focusing on the COVID-19 impact related to the policy makers and public administrations. But of course, as soon as the pandemic will stop, it will also be important to focus on the rest of the diseases and the rest of the, important health topics that needs to be addressed. So cancer is exactly one of these. And what is more important is that, policy makers are focusing on KPIs and indicators to address the cancer topic and to prepare for the next cures and the next services to provide to patients. So this is, very important, and it's an health aspect that really will impact the population in the European countries. On the other side, we've been focusing also on well-being, in particular with the radicalization problem. And we've been, seeing that it is really important to address this topic because it affects the whole of Europe and the whole world, I would say. So it is really remarkable from the point of view of the replication of the results and from the addressing such a very sensitive topic. As a third presentation, we've been focusing on a more general point of view on the health services, both from the point of view of the services to the public administration, but also from the point of view of the companies that are involved in health. So the companies that provide the services to the citizens. And this gave us an overall clear framework of the policies to be addressed. In all of the three topics, we realized that co-creation and the involvement of stakeholders at different levels is the most important thing to collect and to enlarge as much as possible. And particularly these events are really useful because we can reach a large audience and we can find other people that can be interested and that can participate to this decision making and to the creation of common policies which can address the citizens. So as a recommendation, I would say that is impacting all the three aspects in our tract is really to enlarge as much as possible the audience that can be impacted by our projects, by this decision-making process, and try to be ready in the next year for a more advanced and large participation of the citizens.
Thank you very much, Germana. I think what the topics that jump really up from your summary are the sensitivity of the topic that you dealt with in your track. Something that we'll also be addressing tomorrow in data governance, in the governance ethics, and also again the co-creation, which comes really through all the three tracks that we've seen today. Also a topic that we'll be addressing tomorrow more extensively. So thanks from all the moderators that have been taking us through the different topics: health and social well-being, climate change and mobility. These are only a few of the topics that we address in the 19 pilots that the projects share. So really invite you to join our community and to read our roadmap that we've defined together. For today, the Evidence-Based Policymaking in Europe Summit 2021 now goes into a lunch break. But we have, after lunch, we have the Policy Cloud Innovation Workshop that is from 3 to 5 today. where we'll be addressing more into depth the tools and pilot cases that Policy Cloud is working on. What I wanted to highlight as well is that, let me see if I can move the slide. Tomorrow, we really hope to see you back for day 2, where today we've really focused on evidence-based policy making, the pilot cases, and from data to decision making. Where tomorrow we're going to focus on the tools, so where we will look at from this digital disruption to digital adoption. We have with us tomorrow Roberto Di Bernardo, Michael Milkin from OASC, Suzanne Dumouchel from EOSC, and Shock, Natalia Manola from OpenAir, and Roberto Di Bernardo from the BDVA Open Government and R&D group. We then have another 3 tracks, one focusing on co-creation and stakeholder engagement, another one on policy prediction and the tools, and another one on governance ethics. So we really want to welcome you back tomorrow, and want to thank you for your attention today, and wish you a very nice lunch. Just to remind you that all the recordings and slides will be made available after the event, and we will be working on policy briefs and a post-event report for you to read the summary of the event and our main recommendations. Thanks a lot to all our speakers today. Thank you very much. Have a nice lunch.